Hello everyone, welcome back to Daska Discusses. You know, in 1983, a movie came out that was so violent, so profane, so over the top that critics called it deplorable, disgusting, and a failure. Yet it went on to become one of the most cultural Bible for like rappers, hustlers, and dreamers around the world. I'm talking about the movie Scarface, directed by Brian De Palma. FYI, there's going to be some heavy language and some inappropriate themes, so if you're not of age, please leave now. Scarface, 1983, starring Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer. This was a controversial film, and we're going to dive deep into the making of Scarface and why it's so culturally significant today in 2026. Let's do this. Now let's just go back a bit and talk about the origins of Scarface. The idea for the 83 Scarface actually began with the 1932 gangster film of the same name, directed by Howard Hawks. That movie was loosely based on Al Capone. You fast forward to 1979, producer Martin Bregman asked Oliver Stone, who had just won an Oscar for Midnight Express, another great movie, to write a modern update on Scarface. Now, Stone doesn't just write from his desk, he does something a bit crazy. He goes to Miami, he rides with narcotics detectives, visits crack houses, and even spends time in South America meeting cartel figures. He comes back with a 180-page script that De Palma later calls the best first draft he ever read. Now, there's a bit of interesting stories about Oliver Stone and how he went through the research to make Scarface. And by research, I mean he was practically on cocaine when he wrote some of the script, apparently, which is very interesting and also disturbing at the same time. With this 180-page script, the next big question, who was going to play Tony Montana? Al Pacino had just come off Godfather 2 and Dog Day Afternoon, two great films. He was Hollywood royalty at the time, but he was also known to be extremely intense. Pacino read the script and immediately said yes, but he didn't just show up. He actually spent months researching. He watched hours of footage of Cuban refugees, worked with a dialect coach, and even visited prisons. Stephen Bauer, who plays Manolo, or Manny, actually helped Pacino perfect his Cuban accent, which is interesting. The two of them would improvise for hours, and you could see in the film itself that they really had this good chemistry. I love Manolo. Now let's talk about the Miami backlash that happened. So they had the script, Pacino was locked in, now it was time to shoot the movie, and they wanted to do it in Miami, right? Obviously, because that's where a lot of, the immigrants from Cuba came from. That decision lit a bit of a fuse because in the summer of '82, when word got out that a major Hollywood movie was coming to town, that it would show Cuban refugees arriving during the 1980 Mariel boat lift, quickly rising to become cocaine kingpins, the Cuban community kind of like lost their proverbial in Miami. There were these people that fled Castro's Cuba. These people built successful businesses, worked incredibly hard to change that image of Cubans in America. And to them, Scarface wasn't just a movie, it was like a potential public relations disaster that would make everyone who's Cuban in Miami look like some sort of drug-dealing criminal. And even to this day, now the producer, Martin Bregman, later said that he tried to reason with the community leaders. He pointed out that he's going to employ a lot of Cuban actors and crew, and that Tony Montana's mother and sister represented the hardworking, honest side of the community, which, you know, Tony's mum does say, you know, people come here, look at you, you're giving us a bad name. People come here and work hard and look at you with your jail manners, she says. It didn't matter though, because the opposition was fierce, and the Miami City Commissioner, Demetrio Perez Jr., became one of the loudest voices against the production. He demanded that the script got changed. Among other things, he wanted Montana portrayed as a spy sent to corrupt America, not a refugee chasing the American dream. He even suggested to the filmmakers dedicate at least 20% of the movie to positive anti-Castro activities. When that didn't happen, Perez and others worked to block the filming. Protests erupted. There were rumors of threats, violence. Stephen Bauer, who plays Manolo, the only actual Cuban in the main cast, later recalled getting some serious heat from the older generation of Miami Cubans. I mean, you don't blame them in a way. Imagine trying to film a multi-million-dollar film while the city you're shooting in basically wants you gone, and De Palma described the atmosphere is like pretty much under siege. So in the end, the production only managed to shoot for about 10 to 14 days in Miami, and they were mostly like exterior shots and the infamous chainsaw scene. The rest of the movie, including the Freedom Town part, was actually filmed in LA. They recreated that. So that's one scene that always stuck with me, that Freedom Town. As a kid, I never really understood what it was all about, but as you get older, you kind of get it. Yeah, Freedom Town was where the refugees went. Now, the Miami backlash didn't just complicate the shoot. It kind of like fed into the movie's like raw, dangerous, violent energy, and you can feel that tension and paranoia on the screen, I reckon. The film was already about excess and violence and drugs, and the real-world drama surrounding its creation just amplified that. The drama wasn't over after they left Miami, the real test of how far Scarface was willing to go came in one single infamous scene that almost got the entire film banned from theaters. And we're talking about the chainsaw scene. So early in the movie, Montana and his crew go to a motel to buy cocaine from a group of Colombians led by Hector, the Toad. That's the guy at, the start of the movie. I got something for you, and what is that, 13.5? What do you think we are, baggage handlers? So he meets Hector, and that's the same guy from a few different movies, actually. He's in the one about Mozart. Amadeus, yep. So the deal goes pretty bad. They tie up one of Tony's guys, Angel, and in the bathroom what follows is a very brutal, unforgettable sequence in 80s cinema. Now, before this sequence, Al Pacino's character, Tony, says, "I don't like Colombians," and not in that he uses some F words in there. So already, as the audience, you're kind of getting this whole feeling that, okay, they're dealing with these Colombians. Tony doesn't like them. Hopefully everything goes well, but it doesn't. Here's the thing that still shocks people today. When you watch a scene, the movie never actually shows the chainsaw cutting into the flesh, right? De Palma was smart. He shows the screaming, the blood splattering on the walls, the chainsaw revving, and Tony's horrified reaction, but the real gore happens in your imagination. You think that you see the chainsaw chopping the guy's head and then his leg, but you see it kind of like cuts away straight away, and you just see this splashing of the blood all over Tony and all over the walls. So that's the thing. It was kind of like a Hitchcock kind of thing, where in Psycho you don't see the knife actually penetrating the flesh. In this, yes, the chainsaw's loud and there's blood, but technically, nothing really was shown. But it was enough to send the MPAA into a panic. So De Palma had a few issues. They wanted him to cut it. He submitted it 3 times and they gave him an X rating, which is not good because basically when you're making a movie in America, you want an R rating. So De Palma was pretty peed off. He basically told them, fine, I'll show you. For the appeal, he brought in real narcotics officers and DEA agents who testified that the level of violence in the film was tame compared to what actually happened in the Miami drug wars of the 80s. And in the end, they won their R rating. So De Palma got his way in the end. I mean, this movie's filled with like iconic scenes, but that one there, everyone remembers the chainsaw scene. Everyone remembers that scene. Everyone remembers the first time you meet Tony Montana, the intro, and obviously the epic ending, which we'll talk about later. Now, after the audience survives that screen, both on and off screen, the production still had plenty more chaos in this film, right? So what I want to call this part of the podcast is the production madness, because Scarface wasn't just filmed, it barely survived. So let's start with the obvious, the use of cocaine. Now, in the final third of the movie, Tony sits behind his desk. Now, remember Tony's story, right? This protagonist, the hero's journey in a way. He starts off as a refugee. He's poor. He's working at a sandwich shop or whatever it was. ¿Qué pasa, man? Man on a sandwich, man. Yeah. And as the movie progresses, he gains more power. He takes care of Frank, and then he ends up in this giant mansion that if you've played GTA Vice City, you know all about it. Oh man, what a game that was. But he sits behind this desk with what looks like a small Mount Everest of cocaine. Now, that mountain of cocaine was mostly baby powder and lactose, as I've read, and they went through hundreds of pounds of the stuff. Al Pacino was actually snorting so much fake cocaine that during takes that his nostrils actually got raw and inflamed. He had to see a doctor about it. So that's pretty funny. Michelle Pfeiffer, playing Elvira Hancock, had a brutal time. She was only 24 and said the role was one of the darkest she'd ever taken on. She does a really good job, I think, Michelle Pfeiffer. She almost quit multiple times, and she found the whole experience so draining that she'd just go home nights and cry, she said. But she pushed through, and I think she's a really good counter to Tony, who's like very loud and a bit obnoxious at times, and like, I work hard for this, and then she's like, well, maybe someone should have given it to you, would have been a nicer person. And I've always wondered, like, Tony really does go hard on her during that dinner scene when he's like, I can even have a baby with her. Her womb is so polluted, I can even have a baby with her. And then she's like, throws a glass water at him, and she's like, what kind of father would you be? And then she just leaves. So we don't actually know what happened to Elvira after that. But her character, I think Michelle Pfeiffer is quite iconic, especially when Tony's dancing with her. And he's like, what's your name? She's like, Hancock. Hancock? Sound like a bird. Hancock, flying around. Let's talk about the soundtrack and the sound of Scarface, because you really can't not mention it. Brian De Palma made it one of the smartest calls. He hired Giorgio Moroder, who's an Italian electric pioneer behind Donna Summer's big hits like Hot Stuff, but Also, I think he was part of Midnight Express. He did as well. But he didn't just score the movie. He created like a pop culture iconic soundtrack. Like things like Push It to the Limit that apparently were written for this film. With that montage, of Tony going from nothing to the kingpin. I mean, you ask anyone, I remember my cousin had it as their ringtone. Push it to the limit, the limit. Moroder actually won the Golden Globe actually for the score, and it might be the best 80s thing ever committed to film in terms of like the use of certain songs and the soundtrack itself. Like, you can't tell me that it's not immediately recognizable in the opening scene with the text scroll comes down telling us about the opening of the Mariel Harbour, whatever, and and then even at the end, like that theme, the Scarface theme, goes throughout the whole film in certain points, and it's highly iconic and memorable. Let's talk about the release and the initial failure. So by the time filming had finished, everyone was exhausted. Pacino was physically and mentally drained. De Palma knew he had made something very extreme, and the studio was nervous. So they had refused to compromise. It was a loud, vulgar, violent, and completely unapologetic, and did hit a nerve with the Cuban community. Now came the hard part, which was releasing it to everyone. So it came out December 9, 1983, right in the middle of the holiday season, going up against Clint Eastwood's Sudden Impact. Expectations were pretty big. Obviously, you got Al Pacino, big director, big budget, which the budget went from ballooned out to 25 to 37 million bucks. So Universal were hoping for a big hit. Instead, they kind of got slaughtered because the critics hated it. They called it excessive, overblown, gratuitous, and even racist. The New York Magazine labeled it an empty, bullying, overblown B movie, and others said that it was way too long, and there was like over 200 uses of the F word alone. Many people walked out, especially the Cuban community during the chainsaw scene. Not everyone hated it though. Robert Ebert actually gave it 4 stars out of 4 and later added it to his great movies list. And the New York Times had some pretty good positive reviews too, so it wasn't all bad. It opened up to a decent 4.6 million bucks from just under 1,000 theaters, and it ended up with 45 million domestically and 66 million worldwide. So for 1983, it wasn't a bomb, but it wasn't a smash that Universal had wanted. So adjusted for inflation, it kind of did pretty well. The studio basically looked at the numbers and said, well, we're just going to move on, and that this is not going to become a big hit at all. This is just going to be another kind of weird Al Pacino action, drug-filled kind of movie. And even Oliver Stone was like, well, I wrote it and we'll see what, probably is not going to do much. Did okay, but little were they to know what was going to happen next. So you got to remember another thing, guys. It may have not been the hugest hit, but in 84 and 85, something unexpected happened. VHS started to get flood the market, okay? People started to buy VCRs, VHS players, and there was like this hip-hop generation that happened as well. So they saw Tony Montana as the ultimate underdog, a poor immigrant who came from nothing. He spoke his mind, took what he wanted, the excess, the cars, the money, the power. It resonated hard, right? Rappers started quoting "the world is yours," it became their mantra. And the movie went from like a theatrical flop to like an underground cult classic. And by the 80s and early 90s, it was a cult classic and eventually straight up referenced in so many rap songs, other movies, video games, and even through all the 90s and even the 2000s, guys. This was huge. Scarface became one of the most influential gangster films of all time. They try to bury it. They try to say that it was too gratuitous and excessive and violence, but in the end, Scarface prevailed because, you watch it and you see Tony Montana's story, and you got Manny, and you got his sister and Michelle Pfeiffer's character, and you've got, Frank Lopez, and you got Sosa, all these key figures. You see how Tony goes from being a nothing to growing, and then even taking on Sosa. Well, taking on, but basically he's that drugged up that he's like, do you want to go to war? We'll take it to war. So people watched it and wanted to see this type of... It's not exactly the most happy story either. It ends really violently. But I guess in a way, maybe that's like its whole... People wanted to like root for the underdog, and Tony was the underdog, but with all the excess, and he's not really a good character to look up to, but this whole rap culture and, young teenagers, all that, watched it and thought, yeah, Tony Montana, I want to be like that. Don't F with me, you're F'ing with the best. And look, let's be honest. I watched this the first time I was 16 years old on tape at my auntie's house with some cousins, and I did think it was a bit long, but I loved it, and I watched it again and again, started quoting it, and then we go to high school, we'll start quoting as well, and then we'll talk about who hasn't seen it yet, and then we end up like borrowing it and watching it again, and then they put it on TV and they cut out all the swearing and all the violent bits. You're like, oh, look what they cut out on TV. So for me personally, it became one of my favorite films of all time, and I got a present for my 21st birthday, an original Scarface poster. It still sits in my living room because it is iconic. That poster's iconic. The movie is iconic, really. Now, let's have some fun here. I spoke to some of my friends before I recorded this podcast, and I was like, all right, guys, tell me your favorite Scarface quotes, right? So we narrowed it down to 5. I've got a few of them, but yeah. So number 5, which was this one here.
All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one. Do you understand?
Oh, such a great quote. All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one. That's a good one that Tony tells Sosa after he sees Hector get hung from the helicopter. That was a good one. Number 4.
All I ever hear in this house.
Manny, look at this pelican fly. Come on, pelican.
Pelican. Fly, pelican. It's a very quick one, but yeah, that is a classic one. When he's sitting in his giant hot tub watching TV and he sees the pelicans, and he's like, come on, pelican. Number 3 was this one here.
This country, you gotta make the money first.
In this country.
Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get the woman. That's why you gotta make your own moves.
That's when Tony's talking to Manny on the beach. That is another classic quote. Number 2. When Tony's out for dinner and he gets up in his coked up state and he starts yelling at the patrons there, and he says this.
You need people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad. Me, I always tell the truth, even when I lie. So say good night to the bad guy. Come on. The last time you're going to see a bad guy like this again, let me tell you.
So say goodnight to the bad guy. That is a classic line. Seriously, this movie is just filled with great lines. Now, before I get to number 1, some honorable mentions is I always tell the truth, even when I lie, which is literally from that sequence as well, the one I said before. But the number 1 quote from the film has to be this.
You want to me? Okay. Okay. Do you want to play rough? Okay. No. Say hello to my little friend. Okay. You like that? Huh? You want more? Your horse?
Do you want to play rough? Okay. Say hello to my little friend. Seriously, that whole sequence of him getting the machine. I know Gina's just been shot. It's quite a emotional, disturbing scene what's happened. But Tony starts getting his machine guns ready, starts getting his ammo, looking at the cameras, that cutting between the gangsters running through all his like mansion. They've just killed a lot of his guards, and he's getting the machine gun ready, and he stands there, and they're like ready to come into the door, and he's like, "Say hello to my little friend!" Bang! Like that scene, you cannot replicate that now. I don't know, you can try whatever, but that is why this movie's so good, because of scenes like that. And then you've got that shootout, which is just mental. Other things I've talked about with friends is like, what if Tony survived? Now, if you played the Scarface video game on Xbox or PlayStation 2 or 3, 2 back in the day, I played it. The first stage is Tony, in the shootout, and then he survives, and then the whole story goes from there. He gets his revenge on Sosa. So if they did do a part 2 and he did survive, I think they would have gone down that path of Tony like having nothing and trying to like get revenge on Sosa or something like that. But I think it's good the way it kind of ended like that, the way it did. Now, when you sit there and compare this to other films, it's hard. Other gangster films, sorry. Like, you can't really, like, in terms of the Mount Rushmore of crime movies, versus The Godfather, for example. Godfather is like Shakespeare, and Scarface is like rock and roll. One's about family honor, and the other one's about raw ambition and self-destruction. So I love them both. Goodfellas is a bit different because I think it's funnier on repeat viewings. I mean, Scarface has some laughs as well, but Scarface has bigger swings. It's like, the amount of damage that happens in Scarface compared to Goodfellas is a lot different. But I think the comedy in Goodfellas is a lot better. And I just think, Al Pacino does a really good job, but in Goodfellas, you've got Liotta, you've got Pesci, and you've got De Niro that kind of hold the screen a lot more than Stephen Bauer does, I reckon. Versus Carlito's Way. Again, same director by De Palma. I love Carlito's Way. Hey, Carlito, he's flaking, man. Totally different vibes, though. It's like Carlito's grown up regretful. He's like a regretful kind of character of Tony. So imagine Tony grew up, got older, and wanted to get out of the business. If he actually listened to his mum, you'd get Carlito. Carlito's a great film. But I think Scarface doesn't win every comparison, but I think Scarface is in its own lane. Like, literally, you're driving down a freeway and you've got all these sub-exits of Godfather, Goodfellas, Carlito's Way. I think Scarface is separate to everything because I think it stands on its own as one of the GOAT gangster films because of its violence and excessiveness and over-the-topness. Oliver Stone did a good job with that script, I'll tell you that. I've got a lot of friends that ask me, Daska, what do you reckon if they made a remake of this? Now, you got to remember that Scarface was a remake of an old film. If they remade it now, there was all those, rumors of Diego Luna playing the new Tony Montana. How would you do it? I don't know. I mean, I would probably change it from Miami to somewhere else, maybe New York. Keep him Cuban, maybe, and then maybe it's got something to do with crypto. I know it sounds stupid, but imagine like social media and a Tony Montana, him posting Instagram. Imagine like going to a club and he's just shot it up or executed someone, then he gets on social media and he's like, look what I've done. I'm the king of this town, Imagine something like that, like a live stream. It would be bizarre, but for this generation, maybe that could work. An over-the-top social media drug leader, but then again, then the cops would just arrest him if he's a bad guy. Anyway, it's just an idea, whatever. Now, it's very hard to pick my favorite scene, but my top favorite scenes of the film, one of them, I think number 5, definitely is when Tony meets Sosa and he gives him that speech about not taking any crap, and he's like, I'll give you my balls and my word. So that's the negotiation scene where Tony like kind of steps up to like the major kingpin and then goes back and tells Frank Lopez that he did a deal. And then Frank's like, you made a deal for $14 million without even telling me? Are you crazy, Montana? Are you crazy? And then he's like, Frank, this deal is puro. You cannot lose money. No way. I love that whole sequence. That's number 5 for me. The restaurant rant, again, was number 4. We talked about it earlier. That is a great scene because it just shows you how much Tony's like lost control. Number 3, highly underrated scene is when he gets revenge on Frank. Even though he doesn't actually shoot Frank, he shoots the cop. Can't remember his name, but yeah. Hey, Frank, you a piece of shit. Come on, Tony. What are you talking about? I believed in you. I'm still loyal to you. I made what I could on the side, but I never turned you, Frank. Never. You know what a hasha is? Hassa is? It's a pig that don't fly straight. I love that scene. And the way, the use of mise-en-scène. Mise-en-scène means what the director puts in the frame with the palm background. It's iconic. So yeah, that's number 3 for me. Number 2 scene, for me, favorite scene is probably the drug deal, the Colombian drug deal with the chainsaws. I know it's quite brutal, but that's a great way to, like, the first act of the film, just show you what the whole film's going to be about. And it's iconic because it's like, he doesn't like Colombians, and then that happens. So yeah, you really can't get past that. But number 1, you know what it is. Come on. It's The Last Stand, all right? We just talked about it. Say hello to my little friend. That is undoubtedly the best scene of the film, is that last portion when probably the last 10 minutes of the film, right? For me, that is my favorite part of the film. And before we wrap this up, let's just say that Tony Montana is the ultimate tragic anti-hero. Like, he says everything we're not supposed to say. He lives the dream we warned about drug deals, and gets the money and all the power. First you get the money and the power, and that's where it ends. He gets shot in the back by that guy that looks like the Terminator with a shotgun. But Al Pacino's performance is so electric that even the over-the-top moments feel legendary. The script is packed with some lines that became part of film culture, rap culture, street culture, and that whole neon look of the Miami 1980s, it's never gone out of style, and it was replicated in so many video games and other films that came after it. Scarface, it's controversial, it's a dangerous film, and it's borderline crazy, but You know, it's excessive, it's vulgar, but it's brilliant because it shows us, I've gone through this, the journey of Tony Montana, one of the most iconic characters in film history. The fact that, like, Al Pacino didn't get recognized for that and that they think, oh, he was over the top, he was overdoing it. I disagree. I think it's one of his best performances, top 3 Al Pacino performances ever. I love this film. And I just want to say to all you guys, what was your favorite scene in Scarface? What was your favorite quote in Scarface? Leave it in the comment section. And please don't forget to drop a review, subscribe. And like I said, tell me in the comments what you thought. And it has been great talking to you guys, discussing Scarface with you guys, a film that I loved and I grew up watching and I still